welcome to not the third review. This is an impressions video because one of those early access titles slipped in through the cracks, and it is Vault of the Void, a single player roguelike card game where you are in control. Um, Build your deck as you go, a CCG experience where you can always modify your deck. Swapping in and out cards before certain encounters will always help improve your odds and allow you to adapt to monster strategies. I think the I think this marketing blurb um, doesn't seem to realize that you're a card game. Some of this is what you do with a card game.
It is, but it also isn't, because this is way more roguelite than it is card game.
All right. Yeah. So this game was assigned to the Galix. So over to him for the impressions.
So when I first thought this was a card game, I thought this was going to be like a PvP card game, and it really isn't. I don't think it even has that as a mode. This is very much, it's more of a game where you're delving into a dungeon to try to reach the Vault of the Void, and just the method you use to overcome the challenges in each room is a card game. So at the beginning of the game, you only start with one class unlocked. Again, this is early access, so they may change some of this stuff later, which is, I forget what they actually call it. It's like the hooded or something, but you're basically a rogue. And you can start your run with one of two decks, which is the bleed deck, which has more cards that inflict bleed, or the blade deck, which has more cards that just build combo. Because in this game there are a lot of side effects that cards can inflict. You got your bleed, you got your poison, you got your... I don't think the hidden can actually inflict some of these, but enemies will inflict things like fear and cripple on you that do various things about your hand size and the amount of resource you have available. So you start off with a basic deck that only has like 5 different cards in it, but you have like 8 of 2 of them, for like a total of 20 cards in your deck. And then you start each run, you get a booster pack. And then after battles, you can have a chance to upgrade a card. Or if you earn void stones, you can socket those into your cards, which improves them in various ways, like adding it to block damage. The damage mechanism is actually kind of interesting. I'll come back to that in a minute. So you got your straight up upgrades. You got your you earn void gems to socket into them. And yeah, so you're not facing like another person with a deck of cards. You're facing a set of like 1 to, I think, up to only 3 monsters in a room, each of which has a set repertoire of actions, and you can see what they're going to do on their next turn, but you can't actually see like what their full repertoire of actions is, and I don't think any of the actions they have are cards that you can get. Each monster has a attack power, which is the number of damage it does, and a frenzy power, which is the number of times it does it every turn. And those can be increased by various things, and they can also have additional special effects like fortitude, which gives them temporary hit points every turn, or special things where, like, if they get angrier if you hurt other monsters or whatever. You get to see what kind of a monster is before every fight, although not everything about them, which is useful because, for example, my last run I accidentally wiped by saying yes because I was fighting a group of monsters that their whole thing is that they get angry and get stronger whenever you play a card that has a cost of 0, and I had just finished speccing my deck to to generate as many as possible cards with a cost of 0 to just stab things to death because I'm a rogue. So obviously, I got my ass kicked by that because they literally were the exact. And you can during a run you can save decks, and so you can like save one configuration you like. What I meant to do was save that deck, build a deck that didn't rely on that, and use that one in the battle, and then switch back. But I accidentally confirmed to start the battle, and it didn't go well. So the way that taking damage works, if you beat a battle without taking any actual damage, you get a perfect victory and you get extra prizes for that. And you start with, I think, 100 health, at least as the rogue. I don't know if the other characters are different, because you have to beat the entire 3-floor dungeon to get to the end to get to unlock the other characters. Like, you have to beat it with a rogue to unlock the second one. You have to beat it with a second one to unlock the third. But yeah, the way damage works in this game is you can see what an enemy's going to do before their turn. And what they do on their turn is they inflict you with threat. Threat, it sits above your life bar. You don't heal between battles, I think, as I was going to say that if I didn't. So you have to make it through the whole dungeon. There are special rooms where you can heal, and there are potions you can earn that let you heal a little bit, but the goal is to not take as much damage as you can. But the only way that that's possible is that any damage you would take pretty much is inflicted as threat, which sits above your hit point. And then on your turn, you can play cards that have block that will subtract from the threat. And if you could get that down to 0, even if it's been inflicted from bleeding and stuff, you don't actually end up taking the actual damage. But depending on things, you can get huge amounts of threat built up that are very difficult to negate, especially if they inflict vulnerable on you that makes you take more damage, or if you piss them off and use free cards when free cards increase their frenzy. And there are some boss fights where there are different rules, where like usually there's one boss monster in the middle that has a lot of hit points, and they can revive their minions, but the minions die if they die. So in those cases, excuse me, there's a lot of just like tolerating what the minions are doing or working around it. Similarly, I can't go into too much detail about this because I only got to play as the one class, but there are cards that are unique to a class, and then there are some cards that different classes can get. So the class gets cards that function with their special abilities. I usually played Blade deck with the rogue in the 3 runs that I did. I tried Bleed once and didn't go so well. I think not that I don't think Bleed is good. Bleed, you inflict bleed on a thing, and they have bleed number, and then they take that damage the next turn, and then their bleed increments by 1, and then they take that damage the turn after that, and then their bleed goes down by 1 until it goes away. But if you keep inflicting it, you can get a steady stream of damage over time. Even the Blade deck with the rogue still ends up inflicting quite a bit of bleed. And yeah, and that you have each class starts with one spell, which is like a free card that you can play every certain number of turns. Like the rogues one gives you a combo, which when you have combo, it makes the next swift card you play, which is a thing that most attacking cards do, trigger multiple times. And then there are some that normally with a swift card it goes away, but if it's a swift card that's balanced, it goes multiple times by combo. But then doesn't go away. So that's ultimately with the blade deck. Building up a lot of those is very effective. And also, there's there's at least one blocking card that is balanced too, which is interesting because that means that the block can trigger multiple times, reducing even more of your threat. So yeah, overall, the mechanics of the game are interesting, though I don't feel like I got all of them, and certainly I know I did not see most of the cards. You can also get different spells from certain merchant squares and stuff, or hexes rather, because the map is hex based. Yeah, actually, overall, I had a pretty good time with this. It's not amazing, but the mechanics are interesting if you're like interested in different card game mechanics. And this is a card game that does take advantage of being computer based. I don't think this would work. It would probably be able to work, but not well. In a physical thing, because there are a lot of cards that like make temporary cards, and the way you upgrade your deck throughout the runs, you'd have to have markings on the cards for if they were upgraded or whatever if you were doing it in real life, so that wouldn't work well, I don't think. It's a little bit frustrating that as a roguelike you lose pretty much everything at the end of a run except for like new unlocked spells, and if you beat the game you can unlock new things and you can master some of your common cards, which I think makes them always be upgraded. I'm sorry I wasn't good enough to figure that out for sure. But yeah, if you're interested in a card game with some interesting mechanics, I guess it would be worth checking it out. But it's not amazing, and at least thankfully there doesn't seem to be any recurrent monetization mechanics. That's nice. It's very much the equivalent of playing a what do they call them? Do you know? Like things like a deck building regular card, like a deck building. I want to say they call them like living card games or something, rather than a actual collectible card game where you have to keep buying packs in real life.
No, I do not know what those are called.
Me neither.
I think I've heard living card game or something. Anyway, the game there's no like way to get particular advantages aside from playing the game more. Do you guys have any questions?
No.
Neither do I.
Right.
I think I'm good.
Oh yeah, also you can unlock other things such as by points you earn through playing that, such as card backs, which most of which in addition to points or instead of points I think you get for basically for completing certain achievements. Like if you get perfect victories on bosses, you get unlock certain card backs, or different quote unquote, they call them battlefields, but they're basically the equivalent of a playmat. So I guess that's neat. What's the damage price wise, Adam?
At current time of recording, it is $14.99. That's a price point that may change since this is in early access.
I think that's a good price if this is a game that you think you're going to enjoy and you don't go into it expecting to be able to just play against other people. Because the way the game mechanics are in this, I don't think it would work for playing against other people at all. Because you don't have targets, you have spells that are techniques, and you have spells that are attacks. There's no creatures. So yeah, that's a bit. Oh, that's the other thing excuse me. I forgot to go into the other way that they would want me to talk about is the way that the game does resources. You start the game with 3 energy points, and you gain 2 at the start of every one of your turns. And your hand, cards in your hand stay in your hand between turns unless they're cards that specifically say they go away. At the start of each turn, you draw up to I think it's 5 or 6. I honestly wasn't paying attention. You draw up to a hand limit that can be modified based on certain buffs and debuffs you get. And then at any time, you can basically discard a card from your hand to gain another energy, unless they are cards that can't be discarded for that. I think it's called purging, which usually are cards that are temporary cards that you get in unusual ways. Because obviously, if you get like 15 hidden blades, is the name of the biggest free card you get. It's a fairly weak attack, but you can get a crap ton of them. If you could purge those for energy, you'd have way too much energy. And the normal cap of energy is like 5, but it goes up over the course of the game sometimes. And also there's a special ability called Overcharge that some cards give you that basically increase the amount of energy you gain each turn and your max energy by a number, but every turn, if you have overcharge, the amount of overcharge you have goes down. So you have to like maintain it if you want to keep doing big turns. So it's interesting that you can like, so for example, on the first turn, basically any cards in your hand that give you block are useless because the enemy hasn't given you any threat yet, and you can only block after you've been threatened. So any blocking cards you have in your hand on your first turn, you're probably going to just purge, so you have more energy either to play any attacking cards you might have or to get more for the next turn. And that's a fairly elegant mechanic for resource management, I think. Although a couple of times when there's a thing where an effect where you have to discard cards because you either have fear on you or something. A couple of times there's been an issue where I accidentally throw away a card that I meant to play or purge, but not too bad. So yeah, overall, I think this is worth checking it out. I don't know what they plan on changing from it being in early access, so I can't promise anything for that. I think if it's a game that you think you'd be willing to play a lot of and you're not going to be too frustrating by not being able to keep things between runs, I think it's enjoyable for that.
All right. So anything else?
Not really.
Okay, then. So that'll about wrap up the impressions for Vault of the Void. Coming up next, Twilight will be reviewing Airport CEO.